of our creative industries. Building on that momentum, today we explore a powerful and timely theme, Jamaican culture as a catalyst for growth in higher education. This discussion invites us to reflect on how our culture, our music, traditions, identity, and creative expressions can shape not just who we are, but how we teach, learn, and innovate within higher education. And you know, people, the more we learn, the better we can do for the economy, don't it? So, just to start, I want to begin by introducing our guest speaker. Again, just allow me a minute, ladies and gentlemen, for us to get some things started. Just trying to put some things in place so we can limit the interruptions as persons join. Hopefully, we can allow them to close or change or tweak the settings a bit so they may come in as silent as possible. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to introduce our guest speaker for today's session. He is the director of the African Caribbean Institute of Jamaica and the Jamaica Memory Bank at the Institute of Jamaica. He is a respected scholar and cultural practitioner whose work sits at the intersection of culture, identity, and knowledge production. Dr. Henry has made significant contributions to advancing the understanding of Jamaican and Afro-Caribbean cultural expressions, particularly in how they inform systems of knowledge, power, and identity. His research continues to challenge traditional academic boundaries and advocate for the recognition of culture as a legitimate and critical component of higher education. And we're especially pleased to have him with us today as we explore the role of Jamaican culture in shaping global academic discourse, student development, and national transformation. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me by sending the word welcome in the chat or using your emojis, the clap emoji, in welcoming Dr. Kirk Henry. So, Dr. Henry, thank you for joining us. And I know we're looking forward to a very engaging discussion today. The audience are definitely ready to shoot some questions over. And we know you're passionate about culture. But even though culture is something we experience every day living here in Jamaica, we know there are things that we don't know yet. And we're looking forward to you sharing that with us. So let me start by, asking the question, the obvious question, what is culture? Because we see it every day, we probably learn what it is. We know the dance, it includes or involves the dancing, how we talk, the stories that we hear, different things, and it affects us in different ways. But tell us, what is culture?
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure being here to share with you, your team, and the audience. I'm quite impressed by the way in which the team here has decided to have a discussion around the formalization of culture within higher education. Oftentimes, we think about culture, we think about the aesthetics or the performative element of culture without pausing to really reflect and recognize the importance of culture, particularly Jamaican culture in higher education. So what is culture? That's the million-dollar question. Culture alone has over 200 definitions. It's a very complex and complicated term. But to put simply, culture is regarded as the way of life of a people. which takes into consideration their lived experiences, their beliefs, their traditions, their practices. How you dress is a part of their culture. What you eat is a part of your culture. And so culture is that all-encompassing word, right? So we have to, as experts, when we're talking about culture, particularly Jamaican culture, you then ask the question, whose culture? Because Jamaica as a country is a diverse nation. Though it's not enshrined in policy as it relates to diversity, but when you look at our landscape, it is a very diverse nation, right? And so we have to go in a granular way to identify and be specific when we're talking about a Jamaican culture.
And you spoke about, the culture, the definition of culture, but how would you define, and I think this is now lighter, and I know you weren't ready for this, but in thinking and hearing the different aspects of Jamaican culture, I don't think definition is the word, but how would you describe the Jamaican culture from your lens, that is?
I like how you put it. It's not a single definition, but rather a description. So when you talk about Jamaican culture, you reflect on brand Jamaica.
Yeah.
What makes us who we are as a people? So we talk about our resilience, our strength, which is embedded within our history as a people, a history of colonization and enslavement. We talk about a very proud set of people. A set of people who takes hospitality seriously.
Yeah.
So you hear about stories of your grandmother perhaps cooking an extra plate of food just in case there's a visitor who comes by. So we have that warm hospitable way that we actually that actually embodies us in terms of who we are as a people. We are a strong and empowered set of people, and that is reflected also in our athletics, in track and sport, and so on. So those are some descriptors that I would use to describe Jamaican culture.
Definitely. Strong is the word, I think, to describe Jamaican culture. When you spoke about, the different places that we excel, determination also came to mind. And it goes beyond, track and field, sports, or even education. But also, my mother, my auntie, my grandmother look for me sometime and say, boy, pick me determined. Even though we get trouble.
Yes.
But whatever it is that we do, we put our all into it. So we're here to discuss culture, but we're also here to discuss education. Without going too much in your presentation,
Yes.
Dr. Henry, how does culture and education overlap?
That's an interesting question, because I think as a nation, even though we celebrate and glorify culture through national commemorations, Independence Day celebrations, and so on, I think we have farther to go in terms of formalizing culture within our education system. And when I say formalizing culture within our system, I'm talking about using those identity models within our school system. Because to really reflect on it, our present day education system is modeled after a European structure of a European standard, you see? And that becomes problematic when you have other groups of people within the same environment whose belief systems are different, whose philosophies are different, whose ways of thinking are different. And so that is one of the struggles we continue to have as a society when it comes on to formally communicating culture, formally teaching culture within a model that isn't necessarily representative of other groups of people within society. There are other countries who have taken the model of culture seriously, in that they have engaged popular culture in the classroom. There are countries within Latin America who use dancehall music, for example, to teach subjects, be it mathematics or the sciences, you see? We, in terms of identification and alignment, we have to use the methodologies within our context to really communicate. And there's something special when you talk to someone in their own language. When you talk to someone using a mirror that they can identify with, the information resonates differently.
Yeah.
And so I think this discussion is quite important.
Definitely. I'm excited already. Just thinking about, well, the knowledge you have here, sharing how dancehall is used in other countries to teach. And that's something we can definitely use in our own education system, to kind of make things a bit better and easier to be received by the students here. Well, hopefully everyone is just as excited as me. Things are going to get a bit different now. What you're used to is, just a question session where we discuss things back and forth. But today we have a presentation, and Dr. Henry will now take things over and lead us into, just some things that he had put together and wants us to know. Dr. Henry, over to you.
Well, your questions are so pointed, they went to the crux of my presentation. but since I have the presentation, I'll just go with it, right? So there's a previous question that I want our listeners and viewers to think about while I go through this presentation. So the question is, what if culture is not supplemented, but central to education? And what I mean by that is really using culture as pedagogy, and not just mere content. You understand? So the objectives of this presentation: one, I'll define culture, explore Jamaican cultural practices as teaching tools, examine culture-informed pedagogy, and also to highlight the role of cultural institutions, right? Now, what is culture, which I've already defined, so I need not go in that. So there are three broad elements of culture that I think about. There are others, but for me, these are the three core elements of culture. One is culture is performative. And when I say performative, I mean the traditional JCDC kind of projection of culture. The poetry, the song, the dance, and so on. Then there's the philosophical aspect of culture. And philosophical, as Louis Bennett says, that very broad word, but it really means how we think as a people, how we engage with culture as a people, really what shapes our perception and our perspective as a people, and that in essence is cultural. Then we have the industry, culture as industry. And when I talk about culture as industry, you are now familiar with the concept of the orange economics, where culture is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And the question now is, how is it that we as a people who embody our very aphorism, with little more, with talawa, giving so many things to the world, why is it that we still struggle to fully recognize culture as an industry? And by industry, I mean infrastructure. So how is it that the government of Jamaica can then frame culture as a part of a development strategy, and also how other education institutions also buy into culture as an infrastructure and then shape that within the curriculum? For UNESCO, culture is essential to one, the identity and the continuity of communities. I was I was scrolling through TikTok, and I came across a conversation around slavery and the legacies of slavery. And a gentleman, I can't remember his name, was saying that people of African descent in the diaspora, be it Jamaica or the Caribbean, suffer really from a lack of self-esteem, not a lack of self-confidence. Because out of the 300 years of slavery, we know that you're confident in doing the job.
Yes.
But there's a self-esteem issue that is plaguing Jamaicans, and that self-esteem issue has to do with your sense of worth, right?